Celine Ward's fingers trembled as they hovered above the keyboard. Not from nerves, not even from the 3 double-shot lattes she'd downed that morning to stay awake, but from pain. Sharp, low, rising. She gripped the edge of the marble desk, Dorian Kael's desk, as the next contraction hit her like a freight train. She bit her lower lip so hard she tasted blood. Her other hand clutched her abdomen. Breathe, Celine. Just breathe. Not here. Not now. Not when she was still supposed to be invisible. 8 months. 3 weeks. That's how long she'd concealed the truth inside the glittering walls of Kael Systems. How long she'd balanced spreadsheets and secrets, board meetings and morning sickness. The father of her child, her boss, stood 20 feet away, commanding the conference room like a general in his war zone. Unaware. Untouchable. Unforgiven. Celine, he called, not turning. The revised Hudson Bay projections? She jolted upright, blinking through the white spots in her vision. Almost ready, sir. Sir, that's what she still called him. Even after Vancouver. Even after the hotel suite, and the whiskey, and the way he pulled her into his arms like the world outside didn't exist. Even after that night that scorched her memory. The storm had grounded their private jet. They'd shared a suite, a single night that changed everything. He'd touched her like a man who didn't believe in second chances. He'd kissed her like he needed it more than breath. And then, the next morning, he was Dorian Kael again. Untouched. Untouchable. They'd never spoken of it again. And now she carried the living consequence of that night. A girl. His daughter. Her heart thundered in sync with the pain now seizing her lower back. She leaned down, pretending to pick up a pen from the floor, just to conceal the grimace twisting her face. She needed to get out. She needed... Celine, a familiar voice whispered, sliding in beside her. Kessia, her best friend, her lifeline. I came as fast as I could. You called me from the restroom. What happened? I think it's time, Celine whispered, her eyes glassy. Cassia's gaze dropped to Celine's trembling hands. Then her wide eyes darted to the pale sheen on her forehead. Okay. Deep breaths. Elevators this way. No one saw me come in. Let's go. Celine stood too quickly. The world spun. Her knees buckled, and Kessia caught her with one arm around her waist. As they moved toward the elevator, Celine cast one last glance toward the conference room. Dorian still hadn't noticed. He probably wouldn't until the delivery email bounced back from her inbox. Until her desk sat empty. Until her name stopped appearing on his calendar. That had been the plan all along. Leave quietly. Start over. But fate had rewritten her timeline. And now, as the elevator doors slid shut, Celine knew. Everything was about to change. Hello, beautiful family. Have you ever had to keep a life-altering secret at work or from someone you love? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you are new here so you don't miss what happens next. Now let's continue. By the time Celine was 6 months along, she'd mastered the art of concealment. Wrap, dresses, tailored blazers, high-waisted skirts that flattered and disguised. She had backup outfits hidden in her car, a compact fan in her purse for the sudden flushes, and a bottle of ginger oil in her drawer for the nausea that struck mid-meeting. But her best weapon? Discipline. No one at Kael Systems suspected a thing. Not the board. Not the nosy admin assistants on floor 23. And certainly not Dorian Kael, the man who made sharks look soft. He wasn't cruel. Just impossibly demanding. Ruthless in precision. Every minute of his life was optimized, calculated, flawless. That's why Celine was hired in the first place. She didn't flinch. She didn't falter. She didn't fall. Until she did. 6 months earlier, the Vancouver storm had changed everything. They were grounded after a pitch meeting, fog blanketing the tarmac, every outbound flight canceled. Dorian hadn't looked particularly annoyed, just impassive, like weather was beneath his notice. I'll book rooms, Celine had offered, already scrolling. Just one, he said. Her fingers froze mid-scroll. Sir? His eyes didn't move from his phone. There's a tech convention in town. Nothing left but presidential suites. I'll take the couch. He hadn't taken the couch. Not after the lights went out. Not after the tension between them finally snapped like a taut wire. 1 second, they were arguing over a firmware clause. The next, he was inches from her, voice gravel low, accusing her of looking at him like she wanted more. And if I do? She'd challenged. His mouth had been on hers before she could finish. They hadn't spoken during. No sweet words. Just mouths and hands and hunger. His jacket hit the floor. Her skirt followed. Her back arched against silk sheets while his fingers gripped her thighs with reverence and fury all at once. And after? He'd dressed silently. By the time she woke, he was gone. Celine walked into the executive wing of Kyle Systems like she hadn't cried herself to sleep for nights afterward. Like she didn't throw up each morning in the restroom before anyone else arrived. Like her life wasn't ticking toward an impossible deadline. No one asked why she drank peppermint tea instead of espresso now. No one questioned why her stilettos had quietly been replaced with low-block pumps. Because she never gave anyone a reason to look too close. And Dorian Kale never looked twice. He barely looked once. He barked orders, scheduled investor dinners, demanded travel itineraries down to the minute. He didn't notice the shadows under her eyes, or how she flinched when the elevators jolted. She'd typed out her resignation letter 10 times, but every time her finger hovered over send, her heart whispered not yet, not yet. Not when part of her still longed for something that shouldn't exist. Not when her daughter deserved better than being a secret shame. Cassia, her best friend and only confidante, was the one who forced her to plan. "You can't keep doing this," Cassia said one night over Thai takeout. "He's going to find out." "No," Celine replied firmly. "He never will. You think you can hide this forever? A baby's not like an unpaid invoice, Cell. She'll cry. She'll need things. What if something happens?" Celine had no answer, so she made a decision. At 9 months, she would leave. New city, new identity if she had to. She had savings. She had a degree. She could freelance. Portland was only a few hours south. Quiet. Green. Far enough. She printed her final resignation letter on heavyweight paper, dated it, folded it, placed it in an envelope, and kept it in her purse like a live grenade. By her 8th month, breathing got harder. Buttons refused to fasten. She walked slower. Her back screamed every time she sat too long. And yet, she still made it to the office before anyone else. Still organized Dorian's schedule with robotic efficiency. Still stood in heels, shorter now, but still, during 12-hour pitch marathons. Only Cassia noticed the swelling. Only Cassia checked in daily. Only Cassia would know to come running when Celine finally made the call. Because she knew this illusion couldn't last forever. She just never expected it to end in blood. The moment the jet wheels scraped the runway, Celine knew something was off. Their pilot's voice had sounded too calm. The kind of calm that masked frustration. Fog advisory. No clearance to depart until the following morning. She'd expected Dorian to rage, to bark at someone, maybe even book a helicopter out. But he just stood, rolled his cuffs and said, "Find a suite. We'll regroup tomorrow." His voice was unreadable, just like his expression. Celine had swallowed hard. "Of course, Mr. KL." The room was quiet. No minibar hum, no traffic below, just the tick of the designer wall clock and the distant moan of the city beyond the fogged glass. Celine stood near the window in a bathrobe, fingers fidgeting with the hem. Her hair was damp from the rainfall outside. She'd gone for a walk to clear her mind, but came back even more tense. Dorian was in the living area, still in his suit pants, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He discarded his tie on the back of a velvet chair. Their laptops sat closed, dinner untouched. The silence stretched like a wire between them, tight, thin, waiting to snap. "You've been quiet," he said. "So have you." He turned slightly, watching her in the reflection of the glass. "I don't do small talk," he murmured. "No," she replied softly. "You do dominance, structure, control." A beat passed, then another, and then, "Is that a complaint?" "It's an observation." He stood slowly, walking toward her like a man who hadn't yet decided if he was about to argue, or do something else entirely. Her pulse quickened. "You've been different since Zurich," he said, stopping a few feet away. She kept her voice neutral. "I've been busy." "No, you've been tense, distracted, angry, even." She turned her head. "You read a lot into things." "I read people," he corrected. "It's my job." "Then maybe you should look harder." Her voice broke slightly. "Because I'm standing right here and you still don't see me." His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. And then it happened. Fast, reckless. He reached for her, pulled her against him, kissed her like he'd been holding back for a lifetime. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was a collision, mouths crashing, hands frantic, hearts pounding. She gasped as he lifted her effortlessly, pressing her against the sweet wall. Her robe slipped, exposing bare skin. "Tell me to stop," he growled, voice low and taut. She didn't. Her hands gripped his shoulders as his mouth trailed down her neck, as his hands explored every inch of her like a man starved. She wasn't thinking. She was burning. He laid her on the bed like she was something sacred. He kissed her deeper, slower now, like he wanted to memorize her, and then his lips trailed lower. Her back arched, her breath caught, and for a long time, nothing existed but the rhythm they created together, the heat, the hunger, the unspoken need between them. Celine lay staring at the ceiling, sheets twisted around her legs. Her chest still rose and fell fast. The air was thick with sweat and disbelief. Beside her, Dorian stood by the window, shirtless, a glass of something amber in his hand. He didn't speak, didn't look at her. She wrapped the sheet around herself and sat up. This was a mistake. His voice was clipped. Yes, a dagger through her chest. She stood quickly, gathering her robe. "I'll sleep on the couch." He didn't argue, didn't stop her, didn't even turn. By the time she woke, the bed was cold. His luggage was gone. The suite was clean. He hadn't left a note, no text, no call. Just silence. Back in Seattle, he acted like it never happened, never touched her again, never even looked at her too long. And Celine? She'd cried for 2 nights straight. Then one morning she threw up, and everything changed. She stared at the positive test, her entire life flashing before her in pink lines. Dorian's voice echoed in her mind. "I don't do family. I don't do love. They're liabilities." Her hand trembled. Cassia knocked on the door. "Cell? Are you okay?" No, that was the last time she said that word out loud. From that moment on, she had a mission: survive, protect her child, and never, ever let Dorian Kale know the truth. Until fate forced her hand. Hello, dear family. This iZone night. One choice, one secret that changed everything. If you've ever faced the consequences of a single moment, drop your story in the comments. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe, because the next part gets even more intense. Celine didn't scream when the first real contraction hit. She simply dropped her pen. It clattered against the marble desk, rolling until it tapped the edge and settled into silence. She gripped the underside of the table, her knuckles whitening as heat spread across her lower back like wildfire. Her breathing became shallow, controlled, barely. "Celine?" asked junior analyst Malik from across the room. "You good?" She nodded, forcing a tight smile. "Just hungry. Haven't had breakfast." He grinned and returned to his charts. No one else even looked up. Of course they didn't. No one paid attention unless Dorian Kyle did, and Dorian was locked in his glass-walled office overlooking the floor, laser-focused on the numbers dancing across his dual monitors. Celine closed her eyes and counted slowly. 10, 9, 8. The pain subsided. She exhaled shakily and pushed back from the desk, standing slowly. A second contraction seized her halfway up. Stronger, sharper. Her knees buckled slightly. She caught herself on the back of the chair and leaned into it. No, not here. Not in this glass tower. Not in front of interns and executives and him. Her water hadn't broken yet. She could still get out. She fumbled for her phone. Cassia, her emergency contact, her best friend. Celine fired a text with trembling fingers. "It's happening. Come now. Office." She hit send, then pressed her hands to her lower abdomen. A tiny kick. Lyra. The name hadn't been spoken yet. Not even whispered out loud, but Celine knew it was hers. She took a careful step, then another, down the corridor, into the private restroom near the elevators. She locked the door and braced both hands against the sink. Her reflection was pale, lips pressed into a bloodless line. Sweat beaded on her temple. Her bump, normally disguised beneath layers of fabric, looked undeniable now. Almost there, she whispered to her belly. "Just hold on." Cassia didn't knock. She burst through the private elevator with panic written across her face. Celine was crouched behind the assistant's desk, eyes glazed, one hand between her thighs. "There's blood," Celine gasped. Cassia's heart dropped. "Okay, we're going to the hospital. Now." "I can't." Dorian's presentation. "Screw the presentation," Cassia snapped, hauling her up. "You're having a baby." They made it to the car. Barely. The Uber driver took one look at Celine, moaning in the back seat, and floored it. Rain slicked the roads. Cassia was breathing instructions, calling ahead to the hospital, while Celine screamed through the next contraction. Then, screeching brakes, a spin, impact. The car skidded into a lamppost with a deafening crunch. Celine's head slammed back. Her body jolted. Pain exploded through her abdomen. And then, wetness. Her dress soaked through. Blood. Too much blood. Cassia screamed. "She's pregnant. Help." Everything blurred. The paramedics. The flashing lights. The voices. Until everything went black. Dr. Maya Leung's voice was calm. Assured. "She's in labor. Heavy bleeding, but we're stabilizing her." Cassia clutched her phone in trembling fingers. She's alone. The baby's father, he doesn't know. The doctor nodded. "We need to inform next of kin. I'll call him." Dorian Kale was mid-call with a Tokyo investor when the second phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again and again until the line disconnected. Annoyed, he finally glanced down at the screen. "Cassia Adebayo." He picked up. "What is it?" Her voice cracked. "It's Celine. She's in labor." Silence. A pin could have dropped and echoed for miles. "She's at Mount Providence. There was an accident. She's bleeding. They're prepping for delivery. She's asking for you." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The phone dropped to his desk with a thud. He was out the door seconds later. No bag. No jacket. Just keys, fury, and the sound of tires squealing through the parking structure. The first thing he heard when he stepped off the elevator was her scream. The second was his name. "Dorian." He ran. A nurse tried to stop him. He brushed past her like she didn't exist. And then, there she was. Celine, drenched in sweat, face contorted in agony, clutching the rails of the hospital bed. "I'm sorry," she sobbed when she saw him. "I was going to tell you." "Don't speak," he said, moving to her side, gripping her hand like steel. "Just breathe." Her fingers crushed his. He didn't flinch. Not when the contractions intensified. Not when her screams echoed through the room. He stood rooted, anchored, present. He, who never allowed emotion, was now breathless watching the woman he once dismissed fall apart, bringing their child into the world. And then, a cry, sharp, high, alive. A nurse held up a squirming, red-faced newborn. "It's a girl," Dr. Leung smiled. They placed her gently onto Celine's chest. Celine wept. Dorian just stared. His throat closed. His daughter's tiny fingers curled instinctively around Celine's skin. The nurse glanced at him. "Would you like to cut the cord?" He stepped forward, numb, hands shaking. He cut the cord. Lyra cried harder. Celine looked up at him through lashes damp with tears. "She has your eyes," she whispered. He couldn't speak. He just cupped the baby's head with trembling fingers. "No," he finally said. "She has your soul. Hello, family of love and twilights. Moments like this redefine everything. Would you forgive someone who kept such a secret? Would you stand by them through pain and birth and truth? Share your thoughts below, and if this moment moved you, please like the video, and don't forget to tap the subscribe button, because there's more to come. The storm outside had calmed, but inside Mount Providence, Dorian Kale stood still as stone. He cradled his daughter like porcelain. Tiny, warm, breathing softly against his chest. He hadn't moved in hours. A billionaire, a CEO, a man feared in boardrooms across continents, now silenced by the weight of 7 pounds, 3 ounces of something he didn't know he could love this much. Celine was asleep. Her chest rose and fell steadily, the IV trailing from her hand. For the first time in years, Dorian wasn't thinking about market reports, stock value, or quarterly forecasts. He was thinking about eyelashes. His daughter's. Long, dark, curled against the softest skin he'd ever felt. She cooed in his arms, and something inside him cracked all over again. When Cassia had called, something inside Dorian shifted. Not snapped, shifted, like tectonic plates beneath the surface of a quiet city. He'd always prided himself on awareness, reading people, patterns, behavior. But somehow, he'd missed this. Celine's pale face, the way she sat at her desk with her shoulders hunched, the early departures, the subtle changes in her clothing. She'd hidden it all, right in front of him, and he had let her. Worse, he'd never asked. Now, as he sat in a hospital suite holding the result of that silence, he realized what terrified him most. How close he'd come to never knowing. If she had left, if something had gone wrong. He looked over at her, sleeping, exhausted, beautiful. He'd almost lost them both. Her eyes fluttered open slowly. The room was dim, moonlight spilling through the windows. Her first instinct was panic. Where was the baby? Then she turned her head. There they were. Dorian, still in his sweater from the office, now cradling their daughter against his chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her heart ached. "Hey," she whispered, voice rough. His eyes lifted immediately. "Hey, you named her?" "I waited," he said. "For you?" She bit her lip. "Do you hate me?" "I don't know what I feel," he replied honestly, looking down at the baby. "But I know I'd never forgive myself if I lost this. Her. Both of you." A beat of silence passed. "Her name is Lyra," Celine whispered. "I've always wanted that name." He repeated it quietly. "Lyra Kale. She sounds permanent. She is." His voice didn't shake, but his hand did, just slightly, as he reached out to touch Celine's fingers. They stayed like that for a while. No titles, no business, just silence and breath, and 3 heartbeats finally aligned. Dorian didn't let anyone else handle the paperwork. Not his legal team, not his driver, not even Cassia. He signed everything himself. He carried Celine's bag. He helped her into the town car. And when she tried to protest, "You don't have to do this, you know," he met her eyes and said, "Yes, I do." They rode in silence. Celine looked out the window, eyes glassy, cheeks still pale from the trauma of delivery. Dorian looked at her, often, as if memorizing the new version of her. Mother. His driver pulled up to an unfamiliar building, sleek glass, towering high above downtown. Celine blinked. "Wait, this isn't my apartment." "No," he said simply. "It's my home." She'd imagined it 1,000 times. Marble floors, clean lines, cold design. But now? Now it had bottles on the counter, a bassinet near the fireplace, soft pink blankets folded on the edge of a cream leather couch. The air smelled of baby lotion and something else, warm vanilla maybe. Home. He led her inside, then paused at the door, as if asking permission without saying it. She stepped forward, and didn't look back. Celine hadn't expected the first scream to be her own. Not like that. Not ragged, guttural, pulled from some primal place inside her. But that's what it felt like, being ripped open, not just in body but in truth. She'd spent almost 9 months hiding. Now, there was nowhere left to hide. The pain hit again. Her hands gripped the hospital bed rails. Her breath came in jagged gasps. Sweat streamed down her temples as her body convulsed with effort. A nurse's voice pierced through the haze. 9 centimeters. Almost there. Keep breathing. Another contraction. Another scream. And then, Dorian. It slipped from her lips like a prayer. A plea. She wasn't sure he would come. Not after everything. But then the door flew open. And there he was. His chest rose and fell fast. His eyes locked on hers. He crossed the room in 3 strides, ignoring the nurse's protest. "I'm here," he said, grabbing her hand. "I'm not leaving." Celine sobbed, not from pain, but from something deeper. She couldn't say it, but he heard it anyway. "I didn't think you would come." His fingers laced through hers. "Breathe with me," he murmured. "You're almost there." The room was chaos. Monitors beeped. Nurses moved quickly. Dr. Leung stood at the foot of the bed, calm and focused. Celine's world narrowed to 2 things, the searing pain in her body and the steel grip of Dorian's hand in hers. "You're doing amazing," he said, voice thick. "Liar," she rasped. "No," he whispered. "You're the strongest person I've ever seen." Another push, another wave of pain. And then, "Okay, Celine, one more big push," Dr. Leung said. "She's almost here." Celine cried out, body straining with everything she had left. And then the pressure broke. A single moment of silence, followed by a piercing, perfect cry. The baby was lifted into the air. Dorian blinked, stunned. He stared like he was seeing color for the first time. "A girl," Dr. Leung announced. "You've got a beautiful baby girl." The nurse moved swiftly, placing the newborn on Celine's chest. Tiny, wrinkled, red, breathing, alive. Celine gasped and clutched her. Her daughter, their daughter. She looked up at Dorian, tears rolling down her cheeks. "She's here." He couldn't speak, just stared. Then slowly reached out a hand, brushing his finger along the baby's cheek. So soft, so real, so his. Minutes later, a nurse took Lyra briefly to clean and swaddle her. Dorian followed, watching every step, every motion, as if he might never forgive them for doing it wrong. When he returned, she was bundled in soft pink and resting quietly. He placed her back into Celine's arms, kneeling beside the bed. "I don't know how to do this," he said. Celine looked down at Lyra. "Neither do I, but I want to try," he whispered. "If you'll let me." She turned toward him. "Why now?" His voice cracked. "Because I watched her come into this world, and I felt something break inside me, and I don't ever want to be the kind of man who can walk away from this." Later that night, Celine lay awake while Lyra slept in her bassinet. Dorian was by the window again. This time, he turned first. "I keep thinking about the last 9 months," he said. "How many times I almost asked if something was wrong, but I didn't." "You weren't supposed to," she replied softly. "We agreed to forget." "I didn't forget," he said. Her breath caught. "I thought about that night more times than I can count," he admitted. "But I convinced myself it meant nothing." She smiled faintly. It meant everything. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Dorian crossed the room and sat beside her. "I don't want to forget anything anymore," he said, voice low. "Then don't." He reached out, touching her hand. And for the first time since it all began, Celine didn't pull away. Some bonds are forged in silence, others in pain, but the strongest come through both. If you've ever held on to love through chaos, share your journey. Like, comment, and subscribe to see how Celine and Dorian's story unfolds from here. Mount Providence Medical Center, postpartum suite, 2 hours after birth. Celine stirred awake to soft murmurs and the rhythmic clicking of a chair gently rocking. Her body ached in places she didn't even know could ache. Her mouth was dry, but her arms were empty. She turned her head toward the window, heart pounding, and then she saw them. Dorian, rocking slowly, holding Lyra. His face was unreadable, but his arms were gentle, his hands sure. His thumb stroked their daughter's back with reverence. He hadn't noticed her wake. That gave her a moment to look at him freely. This man who terrified boardrooms, who made CEOs tremble, who could end negotiations with a single raised brow, now sat barefoot in hospital scrubs, completely spellbound by a girl the size of his forearm. "I don't think she likes the moonlight," he murmured, still looking down at the baby. "She kept squirming when I turned toward the window." Celine's voice was low. "She takes after me." He turned then, eyes meeting hers. A flicker of something passed between them, relief maybe, or something deeper. "She's been awake?" she asked. "She barely slept." "She'll do that to you," she smiled faintly. "I don't mind," he said. He stood slowly and carried Lyra back over to the bed. His steps were careful, calculated, but softer than she'd ever seen. Celine shifted, sitting up as he gently passed the baby to her. Lyra gave a tiny sigh, curling into her mother's chest. "Did they give her a name for the record?" he asked. "I told them to wait." He nodded. "You had one in mind?" "Yes," she said. "Since college, before any of this." "What is it?" She looked up. "Lyra." He didn't speak right away. Instead, he repeated it, quietly, reverently. "Lyra Kyle." Celine tilted her head. "You're okay with that?" He met her gaze. "She's ours. I wouldn't have chosen anything else." They sat in silence, the air between them heavy with everything unsaid. Finally she broke it. "You asked me why I didn't tell you." He nodded once. "I wanted to," she whispered. "So many times, but after that night, you shut down, and I wasn't sure what it meant to you, what I meant." He said nothing. "I convinced myself you'd call it a distraction," she continued, "that you'd say it ruined your focus." He turned toward the bassinet now resting beside the bed. "I probably would have." She swallowed hard. "That's why I stayed quiet. I didn't want to give you a reason to resent her. Or me. His hands curled into fists. I was afraid, she whispered. Afraid you'd order me to fix it, make it go away. That you'd see this as weakness. He looked at her then, and his voice was low. You wouldn't have wanted it. I didn't know what I wanted, he said. Her throat tightened. But now, he said, stepping forward, now I want everything I didn't know I was missing. She blinked. Like what? Like the way you whisper her name when you think no one's listening, the way your eyes lit up when she first kicked, the way you protected her from me because you thought I'd fail her. He paused, then knelt beside the bed. I'm not asking you to forget what I said or what I didn't say, but I'm asking you this. Don't shut me out now. Celine looked down at Lyra, sleeping peacefully against her. I don't know how to do this with you, she admitted. I had a plan, a solo plan. I don't need a perfect version of you, he said. I need the real one, the one who rolls her eyes at board meetings and eats mango slices at her desk at 9 a.m. She laughed softly. And you? I'm not who I was, he said. I don't want to be. Later that night, they didn't sleep. Instead, they took turns holding Lyra, feeding, changing her. It was awkward, messy. Celine spilled formula on her blouse. Dorian cursed when he snapped the diaper wrong. But they laughed. Together. At 3:12 a.m., Celine caught Dorian watching her rock the baby. What? She asked. You look like a queen, he said quietly. Covered in spit up. Still a queen. She shook her head, cheeks warm. You're strange. You bring it out in me. They smiled at each other, and for the first time, Celine believed they might actually have a chance. Celine stepped into the penthouse like she was crossing a border. Not into wealth, not into extravagance, though it was certainly both, but into the unknown. This wasn't a hotel. This wasn't a hospital suite. This was Dorian Cale's home. And now, temporarily, or maybe not so temporarily, hers too. The air smelled of sandalwood and soft linen. The ceilings were cathedral high. The windows stretched wall to wall, and beneath them was the city's skyline glittering beneath dusk. But that wasn't what caught her attention. It was the bassinet by the fireplace, the tiny white basket with a rose-colored blanket tucked neatly inside, and the bottle warmer next to a sleek designer couch, and the brand-new diaper bag leaning against an armchair. None of this had been here before. She glanced at Dorian, who was placing her bag down gently by the stairs. You did all this? He looked up, only slightly defensive. I called a consultant. A consultant? A newborn specialist, he said, and an interior organizer. They had a checklist. She arched a brow. You hired a team. I don't know what I'm doing, he said bluntly. So I did what I do best. I hired people who do. There was no smugness in his tone, just quiet, earnest effort. She nodded, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. Thank you. You shouldn't have to do everything alone anymore, he said. Not here. Later that night. The penthouse was quiet. Celine had put Lyra down in the bassinet after her evening feeding and walked quietly into the kitchen in search of water. That's when she saw him, shirtless, standing at the counter, prepping a bottle under warm light. His back was to her, muscles shifting as he worked with practiced movements. She paused in the hallway, pulse skipping. She hadn't seen him like this since Vancouver, and that memory still lived in her skin. He sensed her presence and turned. You're awake, he said. She nodded. She's asleep. For now, he said, pouring the formula. I give it 10 minutes. He glanced at her. His eyes moved down briefly to her bare legs, the silk hem of her robe, then back to her face. A silent current passed between them. Celine stepped into the kitchen, leaning against the counter. You're surprisingly good at this. I read all the instructions twice, he said, and still triple-check everything. CEO instincts? Father instincts, he corrected softly. She stilled. He met her gaze. Why didn't you tell me, Celine? There it was. The question they'd danced around but hadn't truly faced. I was afraid, she whispered. He set the bottle down. Of me? Of everything, she said. You once said love makes you weak, that family distracts from greatness. I was wrong. You were cruel. He didn't deny it. She walked around the island until they stood close. I didn't want our daughter to be resented. I didn't want her to be the reason you lost your edge, or worse, the reason you hated me." His hands clenched at his sides. "I don't hate you," he said. "But you didn't love me either," she said. "I didn't know what love looked like until 3 nights ago." Silence. Then he reached for her, slowly, as if asking permission. When his fingers brushed her jaw, she didn't pull away. "You're not just the mother of my child," he said, voice rough. "You're the only person who's ever made me want more than power." She exhaled, and then he kissed her, not tentative, not apologetic, but with the kind of hunger that said finally. Celine moaned softly as he lifted her effortlessly, sitting her on the cool marble counter. His mouth trailed down her throat, hands sliding under her robe. Her body responded before her mind caught up. She had missed this, missed him. The way he touched her like she was something rare. The way he gripped her thighs with reverence. The way he looked at her, eyes dark, lips parted, like she was his undoing. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her skin. "Don't you dare," she whispered. Clothes were pushed aside. Skin met skin. There was no rush, only heat. He kissed her slowly, deeply, his hands steady as he guided her to the edge, letting her fall apart in his arms before following close behind. They collapsed into each other, breathless, undone. Her forehead pressed to his, and for a moment the world was silent. No company, no fear, just them. He pulled her into his chest, heart still racing. "I thought I had everything." She ran her fingers across his collarbone. "You didn't?" "I had nothing," he said. "Not really." She looked up. "And now?" "I have you," he whispered. "And her." He paused. "If you'll stay." Celine blinked, then kissed him again. A slow, intentional yes. The morning after, Celine stood at the stove, barefoot, her hair pulled into a loose knot. The sun streamed in through the massive windows, lighting up the penthouse with a soft glow. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla hung in the air from the French toast she was trying, and mostly failing, to perfect. Dorian walked in, shirtless, sleep still in his eyes, holding Lyra cradled against his chest. She was wrapped in a pale rose blanket, her tiny face nestled close to his heartbeat. Celine turned when she heard him. He stopped. For a long moment, he just looked at her, like the image of her standing in his kitchen, cooking with his daughter warming against his skin, was something he didn't want to blink away. "Morning," she said softly. He walked closer, one arm still wrapped around Lyra. "Smells incredible. I burnt the first batch. I'll eat it anyway." She smiled. He leaned in, kissed her temple, and handed her the baby. "Your turn." Celine took Lyra gently and held her close. Dorian stayed beside them, watching. "I haven't slept like that in ever," he said. "Feels different, doesn't it?" She murmured. He looked at her. "Everything feels different." They stood in silence, the kind that didn't require words. But then the silence turned heavy. Later that day, they sat on opposite sides of the sectional. Lyra was asleep in her bassinet nearby. "I need to ask you something," Dorian said. Celine folded her legs underneath her. "Okay, when you found out, what were you going to do?" She didn't answer immediately. "Then, I was going to disappear." He flinched. "I had a job offer in Portland. My lease was month to month. I'd saved just enough to leave cleanly." His hands clenched. "You would have left without saying anything?" "I thought I was doing what was best for her," she said. "And for me." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Do you still think that?" "No," she whispered. "Not after seeing you with her." He let out a breath. "You've got this terrifying power over me, Celine. Always have. That's ironic. You're the one who signs my paychecks." He looked up sharply. "Not anymore." She blinked. "What?" "I've already informed HR. You'll transition out of your assistant role. Starting next week, you'll be creative director for Ward Kale Foundation." Her jaw dropped slightly. "That's not a real division." "It is now," he said. "You're already the reason it exists." Her heart thudded. "Dorian, I don't want you working beneath me," he said, voice steady. "I want you beside me." Later that night, he took her upstairs. The rooftop was quiet, blanketed in twilight. City lights blinked far below. Celine stepped into the garden, stunned. "This is beautiful." Soft hanging lanterns swayed gently. A small table for two stood near the edge, overlooking the skyline, and beside it, a bassinet cradle. I had them install that today, he said. For up here? For wherever you want to be. She turned toward him. You're trying really hard. I'm not trying, he said. I'm choosing. She blinked. Choosing what? He stepped closer. You, her, this life. Every day. Celine didn't answer, so he took her hand. I never had anyone to look up to growing up, not like this. No example, no softness, just expectations and steel. And for a long time, I believed that love would make me weak, that family would undo everything I built. She swallowed. And now? He exhaled. Now I look at you and realize I was already undone. I just didn't know it until you gave me something real to lose. A long silence followed. Then Celine leaned into him, rested her head on his chest. Okay, she whispered. Okay. She looked up. Let's see where this goes. His fingers slid into her hair, and he kissed her, soft this time, reverent, real. They lay together in bed, Lyra asleep in her crib nearby. Celine curled against Dorian's side, listening to the sound of his breath slowing. He spoke without opening his eyes. Do you think she'll remember this? Celine smiled. No, but we will. 3 days later, Midtown Seattle, 7:42 a.m. Celine had just fastened the last snap on Lyra's onesie when her phone buzzed. She reached for it, half distracted. Cassia, turn on the news. Now. Her heart skipped. She tapped the remote and switched to Channel 8. The headline slapped across the screen like a slap to the face. Mystery woman leaves hospital with Kyle Systems CEO. Baby in tow. And then the images rolled in. Photos, grainy but clear enough. Celine exiting Mount Providence in a wheelchair, baby wrapped in pink, Dorian close behind with one hand protectively on her shoulder. Another shot of him helping her into the car. Someone must have leaked it. A nurse, a bystander, a paparazzo. Her stomach churned. She switched channels. More headlines, more speculations. Is this Dorian Cale's secret family? From assistant to mother of the heir? Corporate scandal or modern fairy tale? She turned off the TV. Her pulse thundered. Dorian's penthouse, office. He was already on the phone. No comment at this time. No, I will not confirm or deny that. And I expect every single one of you to hold the line. Celine stepped in just as he ended the call. His jaw was locked, his shoulders rigid. He looked at her. I'm sorry, I should have seen this coming. You couldn't have, she said quietly. I should have had the hospital locked down, cleared the exits, paid extra for privacy. Dorian, she interrupted. It doesn't matter. He stared at her, something close to guilt flickering in his eyes. We'll handle it, she added, but we need to do it together. Hours later, emergency boardroom meeting, Kyle Systems, 32nd floor. Every board member was already seated when they arrived. Flashbulbs had followed them from the parking structure up to the elevator. The company's PR director looked 2 seconds from a full-blown breakdown. Dorian entered with Celine beside him. She wore a deep navy pantsuit and carried herself like she belonged, because she did. But her heart thundered in her chest. She didn't flinch when they stared, didn't look away when whispers passed between executives. Dorian opened the meeting without hesitation. This company was built on precision, on strategy, and on loyalty, but it was also built on vision, and I was blind to the most important thing I ever created. Silence fell. I failed to see the woman who has kept this company running, the woman who raised our standards, who protected our reputation more fiercely than any legal department ever has. He turned towards Celine. I also failed to recognize my role in something bigger than quarterly growth. There was a murmur, a tension building. Then he said it. Celine Ward is not just my former assistant. She is the mother of my child. And as of this morning, she is also the new director of strategic vision for the Ward Cale Foundation. Gasps. Eyes widened. A few jaws dropped. And then she stepped forward. Celine's speech. I never wanted to be part of a scandal, she began. I didn't want headlines, or attention, or anyone's pity. I made a decision to hide something very personal, out of fear, out of survival, but I will never apologize for loving my daughter, or for choosing to protect the man who gave her to me, even when he didn't ask for it. Her voice didn't shake. I know some of you are wondering what this means for the company. Let me be clear. It means evolution. She looked directly at the most conservative board member in the room. This company has always operated like a fortress. But fortresses don't evolve. They rot. The Ward KL Foundation will be our first step toward building legacy, beyond steel, code, and profit margins. The room was silent for a long beat. Then, a single clap. Regina Dumont, the only female board member. Then another, and another, until the room filled with applause. As the crowd dispersed, Celine stood beside Dorian near the windows. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I think I am. You handled them better than I ever did." "I'm used to babysitting powerful men," she said with a smirk. He chuckled. "Remind me to put that on your business cards." They stepped out together, hand in hand. The crowd outside roared. Questions flew. "Mr. Kale, are you two together?" "Celine, were you pregnant while working as his assistant? Is this your heir? Are you getting married?" Dorian paused, then turned to Celine. "Your call," he whispered. She looked out at the cameras, then down at Lyra, safely cradled in her arms, then back up. She stepped forward and said clearly, "We'll answer one question." The press held their breath. A young female reporter near the front called out, "Are you in love?" Celine looked at Dorian. He met her eyes. Then he said, "Yes." One word, but it changed everything. The crowd erupted. Flashbulbs exploded. But Celine didn't hear it, because Dorian leaned close, his lips near her ear, and whispered, "I meant it." The day after the reveal, in Ward Kyle Media Room, Celine sat under the blazing studio lights, her spine straight, lips painted with a confident shade of wine red. Beside her, Dorian adjusted his jacket once, then remained still. The cameras were live, and so were a million eyes. They'd agreed to the interview that morning. A single public statement, controlled, clear, definitive, enough to settle the press without letting them feed off chaos. The journalist, Fiona Kell, sat across from them, a seasoned pro with a reputation for getting answers others couldn't. Fiona smiled tightly. "Let's get straight to it." "Why now?" Celine took a breath. "Because silence became more dangerous than truth." "And your daughter? Was her birth a surprise for Mr. Kale?" Dorian spoke now. "Yes. But the mistake was mine. I created an environment where honesty didn't feel safe. That's on me." Fiona arched a brow. "You're saying this was your fault?" "I'm saying I was emotionally unavailable, stubborn, and blind to the woman who stood beside me every day." Celine glanced sideways at him, stunned. Fiona pivoted. "And now?" "Now," Celine said firmly, "we're choosing to raise our daughter with transparency and courage, even if the world watches." The rest of the questions were easy. Plans for the foundation, work-life balance, boundaries with the press. But when Fiona closed with, "Is love enough to hold you through this storm?" Dorian didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, without even glancing at Celine. "Because I've seen what it looks like to lose it." Celine leaned against the railing of the balcony, watching the rain streak the glass. Dorian approached from behind, sliding his arms around her waist. "You were incredible," he said. "So were you," she whispered. "I meant what I said in there," he added. "I know." She turned to face him. "What now?" she asked. "We live," he said, "one day at a time. No secrets, no pretending." Celine rested her head against his chest. "Do you think the board will stick to their support?" "Yes," he replied. "But even if they don't, I already have what matters." He kissed the crown of her head. "You," he said, "and her." The event was held in a newly renovated hall in the heart of the city. Donors, business leaders, and influencers attended. Celine stood at the podium, Lyra in her arms, Dorian beside her. Flashes lit the air. 1,000 lenses caught the image of power, family, redemption. She began to speak. "I used to think ambition and motherhood were enemies, that you had to sacrifice one to protect the other, but I was wrong." She adjusted Lyra gently. "This foundation represents a future where women don't have to choose between their dreams and their truth." Applause erupted. She stepped aside, letting Dorian take the mic. "For years, I built Kyle's systems to be indestructible," he said. "But indestructibility came at a cost, humanity. Now, we rebuild with purpose." He looked at Celine. "And with soul." Celine rocked Lyra slowly. The baby was almost asleep. Dorian leaned in the doorway, arms folded, just watching. "You always look like a goddess with her," he said softly. "She's the only thing that makes sense some days. I need something else to make sense too." He stepped into the room, took her hand. "I love you." Her breath caught. "I love you," he repeated. "Not because you gave me a daughter, but because you gave me a reason to be better. You saw something in me when I didn't." "Dorian." He dropped to one knee. No ring, no theatrics, just truth. "Marry me, Celine Ward." Tears slipped from her lashes. She lowered herself to her knees beside him, cradling his face in her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The three of them curled on the couch, Lyra asleep between them, the fireplace crackling low. No cameras, no headlines, just quiet. Celine rested her head on Dorian's shoulder. "You think this is our happy ending?" He shook his head. "No." She looked up, puzzled. "It's our beginning." Rain tapped gently on the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights dim behind the foggy glass. The penthouse felt quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that wrapped around you like a blanket. Celine sat in the glider, rocking slowly. Lyra was swaddled and asleep against her chest, her tiny breath warm and rhythmic. The mobile spun slowly above the crib, handcrafted wooden stars casting soft shadows across the room. Dorian stood at the doorway. He didn't speak right away, just watched. She looked up when she sensed him, offering a tired but content smile. "I was just about to put her down," she whispered. He nodded. Celine gently shifted, placed Lyra into the crib with practiced care, then rose, smoothing her robe as she turned toward him. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "No," he said. "Something's finally right." He took a step forward, then another, until he stood just inches away, close enough that she could feel the tension in his body, the anticipation, the weight of something unsaid. "I've been rehearsing this all day," he said. She blinked. "Rehearsing what?" "I had a whole plan," he continued. "Something grand, something worthy of the way you've changed my life. Dorian, I even thought about doing it at the gala," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "Stage lights, champagne, applause." She raised a brow. "Why didn't you?" "Because none of those things matter to you," he said softly. "You'd hate all of that." She chuckled. "Not wrong." He took her hand, pressed it against his chest. "I thought I needed an empire," he said. "But what I really needed was someone who'd see through all of that, who'd still believe in me when I had nothing left to prove." Her throat tightened. "You came into my world quietly, efficiently, without expectation," he said. "But you ended up becoming the one thing I never saw coming." Celine's eyes shimmered. He lowered to one knee. "No box, no ring, just eyes full of truth. I want to build the rest of my life with you, as your partner, as Lyra's father, as your husband." Her lips parted, breath catching. "I love you," he said, "and I will spend every day earning the trust I broke and deepening the love you gave me freely." Her legs gave out. She dropped to her knees too, cupped his face, and kissed him, long, soft, certain. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. They sat on the plush rug, their backs against the crib. Celine rested her head on his shoulder. "Are we insane for doing this so fast?" she asked. He tilted his head. "Maybe. Do you care? Not even a little?" She smiled. Their fingers intertwined. Lyra stirred in her sleep, but didn't wake. Dorian looked down at the woman who had dismantled his armor and filled the empty corners of his life. And for the first time in decades, he didn't feel like a man running from something. He felt like a man running toward everything that mattered. The lobby sparkled with crystal lighting, polished granite floors reflecting the movement of hundreds of guests dressed in gala finery. Waiters moved gracefully through the crowd with trays of champagne. Cameras flashed. Murmurs buzzed. The city's elite had arrived in full force. But all eyes turned when she entered. Celine Ward, now Celine K.L., stood in a custom crimson gown that hugged her body with elegance and pride. Her posture was regal, her presence effortless. In one arm she held Lyra, dressed in rose silk with a tiny ribbon around her wrist. And beside her stood Dorian Kyle. Hand in hand, they approached the stage. The applause was warm and thunderous as Dorian stepped to the microphone first. "We designed this building to reflect our values," he said, voice confident, clear. Not just glass and walls, but truth and transparency. This is the first of many spaces where legacy will mean more than profit margins. He turned to look at Celine, because the real legacy of a company, or a man, isn't written in stock prices. It's written in the lives you protect and the people you love. He stepped back as Celine took his place. She adjusted Lyra gently in her arms and smiled at the crowd. As someone who once believed she had to hide to survive, I stand here to tell you this. No woman should be forced to choose between her future and her truth. Silence fell like reverence. No woman should ever have to shrink for a title or disappear to be respected, and no child should ever begin their story in secrecy. Applause broke out again, louder this time. She nodded once, then stepped back. Rain whispered against the glass again, the city below gleaming like a field of stars. Celine stood barefoot in her dressing robe, her hair loose, skin still glowing from the night's spotlight. Dorian joined her, holding 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one and leaned against the balcony railing. "She was perfect tonight," he said. "Didn't even fuss. She's clearly born for high society," Celine smirked. "Unlike her mother." Dorian turned toward her. "Don't say that." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because tonight wasn't about high society," he said. "It was about you, your voice, your courage." She looked down into her mug. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had left? If you hadn't come to the hospital that night?" He exhaled slowly. "I don't wonder. I fear it." She met his gaze, and there it was again, that vulnerable clarity in his eyes. The man who once lived behind steel walls now stood open, unarmored. "You changed everything, Celine," he said. She stepped closer. "So did you." He took her hand, drew it to his chest. "I may have built Kyle systems," he whispered, "but you gave me something no architect ever could." "What?" He pressed his lips to her forehead. "Home." They lay in bed, Lyra asleep in the adjoining room. Celine curled into his side. Dorian ran a hand through her hair, his voice low. "Next year," he said, "I want to take a sabbatical. Just us. Paris, Rome, maybe somewhere quiet with trees." She smiled into his chest. "You? Quiet? For you? Always." She kissed his shoulder, then closed her eyes. And somewhere in the soft darkness, the hum of the city fell away, and all that remained was the sound of 2 hearts that had finally found a place to rest, together. If this story reminded you that love can rewrite even the most guarded lives, let us know in the comments. What moment touched you most? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who still believes in second chances. Until the next story, stay inspired.